What I wanted to talk about with the tutors when we were looking at fractions, decimals and percentages was the importance of making connections between topics. Quite often the delivery of mathematics or numeracy can be quite linear, so you look at one topic and practice that topic, then you move on as though that was the end of it, whereas in fact Malcolm Swan and John Swain in their research have shown that one of the features of effective mathematics practice is making connections between operations. So for example, adding is the opposite of subtracting. Multiplying is a lot of adding. Also making connections between topics and representations of numbers. So a fraction is another way of representing a decimal, which can be represented itself as a percentage. So we looked in the workshop at how we can make links between those topics when it's appropriate to do so. And we also looked at some fun methods for teaching some of those topics. One of the things that we looked at was a resource that was produced following the Swain and Swan Maths for Life project, which was a resource which had a lot of ideas for how to teach fractions so that learners really fundamentally understand the topic and rather than just learning aspects of the topic and practicing, they're actually deeply understanding it. And we're going to share that website address with the people who came to the workshops today. The second thing that we were looking at was contexts, and this is something I've been interested in for a while. We often, I think, make too much of an effort to make a context real, when in fact what we should be doing is making sure that the context is meaningful. And a meaningful context to one person maybe isn't meaningful to someone else. So we were asking questions about that. One of the examples that we looked at was a waste paper bin, and we said, well, what maths could you do looking at a bin? Well, you could work out the circumference of the top of the bin, the capacity of the bin, the height of the bin, but really how meaningful is that to people? Where do we find those meaningful contexts with our learners? And we spent quite a bit of time looking at that as well. An example of that is something that Mark Prendergast has talked about, which is looking at a game of snooker and working out an algebraic formula to represent the scoring of the game of snooker. Now, it's possibly not realistic that we would ever sit down and watch snooker while writing out algebraic formulae because that scoring is done for us. However, to people who play snooker all the time, it's a meaningful way into starting to understand algebra, and algebra is notoriously difficult to find contexts for so that people can understand an abstract operation as something which is more concrete.